and NGOs have gathered to mobilize for climate justice. They're marching down this street here as the UNFCCC Climate Change Conference continues this week. So Megan, what's going on now?
Well, we've been marching with hundreds of locals and people from all across Central and South America and various non-governmental organizations for about 3 kilometers now, and it seems like we're approaching the end, so we're going to be trying to go get some interviews.
We coming here to raise of the people's voice and to call the government, don't delay the decisions. If they delay the decisions, the life of millions of people is in their hands, and they will be the responsibility of these deaths.
Well, in Cancun, you have all the world's governments who are supposed to make a decision to cut emissions of greenhouse gases that are killing the planet. And we're outside here today on the street with all these Mayan communities who came from their nearby region. This is Mayan territory, and their corn crops are being killed by drought and hurricanes and floods and forest fires, and they've come here to also demand cuts in greenhouse gas emissions, commitments, not just pledges, and also that their rights are ensured in any decisions that are made here.
So Oxfam's joined partners and alliances from across the Latin America region in a really, really colourful march here today to make our voice heard about our demands for urgent action on climate change. So as you can see behind me, we have these traditional Mexican puppets which are called mojigangas. We have 4 farmers, 2 men, 2 women, and a giant corn on the cob, maize, and it's basically a representation of traditional Mexican farming, because for Oxfam our main message here at the COP is about the impact of climate change on people living in poverty, and what we're trying to draw attention to is the fact that poor people are hit first and they're hit worst by climate change, and that's one of the key reasons why urgent action on climate change needs to be taken.
A lot of farmers which lost the cultivates, they lost the crops because the don't want rain. It's the drought was very intensive. In the last years, this intensity of drought increased and affected the poor farmers.
El cambio climático está generando altas temperaturas que no se habían registrado antes. Con ello está matando los cultivos.
Because the climate change is creating temperatures that we haven't seen before, and it's also destroying like crops that people grow.
Pero también estamos sufriendo mayor incremento de tormentas tropicales, de huracanes y de lluvias más fuertes y durante más tiempo, lo que también arruina los cultivos.
And we're also seeing more tropical storms, hurricanes, and also much more strong rains that are also destroying the crops that people plant.
Well, what we hope it looks like is that all the countries that were parties to the Kyoto Protocol make a second commitment to that for another round of cuts. The biggest thing is those emission cuts in the commitments form have to be made. And then, of course, the financing, the technology needs to start now. And then all those decisions need to be taken in the context of a human rights framework, and of course indigenous peoples are very mobilized to ensure that theirs will happen.
Particularly what we're campaigning for at this COP is the urgent establishment of a fair climate fund, which will ensure that climate finance will reach the poorest people first, those who most need support to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And we're also trying to raise awareness of the impact on women especially, because women are always adversely impacted. They're first and worst impacted by climate change, and so we want to make sure that they're considered when the negotiations are agreeing decisions this week.
The space of UN is the unique space in the world in which each country, not important what is the size of the economy or the number of the people, have the right of one vote. Bilateral negotiations is very dangerous because it can to erosion the UN. And UN is the unique forum in the world in which need to conduct the negotiations.
To me, the biggest nightmare would be the U.S. proposal, which is just a set of voluntary pledges that don't add up enough to really cut what science says we need to cut, and that looks like a future of 5-degree Celsius increase for the world, which means death for millions of Africans and for lots of indigenous peoples and people who live in low flood zones and so on. And that's the nightmare scenario that could come out of Cancun. But of course, we hope that there's goodwill and cooperation and that the governments come to their senses. But it takes a lot of noise on the street to make that happen.
Three, okay.
5.
¿Nada concreto?
No, nada.
Well, he thinks about the negotiations inside in COP16. He doesn't think it's going to be anything, any result, any concrete.
This thing's a roller coaster, and you never know. That's why it all comes down to the last minute.